Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. With me, as always, is Mr. Mustache, Cullen McFader.
Yeah, that's what they call me now.
How are you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. And I, of course, am Clark Coffee. And today, on episode 46, wow, I can't believe it's 46.
I know.
We
Almost
are
at
going...
50.
What?
Almost at 50.
We're gonna have to think of something special to do for 50, man. We're gonna have to put our heads together and think of something. 50th anniversary, that's a big one. But we are covering Martin Scorsese's 1986 film, The Color of Money, starring Paul Newman, Tom Cruise. You've got Forrest Whitaker's in there. You've got, who else do we have? I mean, this film's packed with great performances, but I'm excited to get into this with you. This is a film, it's definitely, look, Scorsese's made a million great films. This one often kind of is a little on the, stays a little on the down low,
Yeah.
It's a little lower profile, but I think it's an outstanding film, and I think it's kind of an interesting film for a handful of reasons. So I'm excited to discuss it with you today. So, right off the bat, let's jump into one of my favorite parts of our discussion, our personal experience with the film. Yeah. And as I understand it, you've not seen the film before.
No, I'd seen The Hustler, which of course is a sequel to years ago.
Okay,
and I don't really recall The Hustler all that well, but
right.
But yeah, this was the first time I'd seen this one.
Okay. What did you think?
I loved it. Yeah, I thought it was great. I'm a big, as everyone is, I really like Scorsese, and I think that he's, a really masterful director. An interesting director for me because I have limited influence from him. Okay. I don't really set out to make movies like him in a weird way, but I love him, and it's like I think he's really, really an interesting director. I guess my intonations are different, but no, I thought this was it's very fun. It's for the most part, I'd say, a lighthearted movie, and but it also, there's some, pretty heavy drama stuff in there, and you get I love Newman. Newman's my favorite actor as well, or at least definitely one of.
Yeah.
And so I think that his performance was amazing. You got Tom Cruise coming off Top Gun, which
hadn't been released yet, though.
Yeah, hadn't even been released.
So that's one of the things that makes this film interesting, is that this is Tom Cruise before he really turned into international superstar Tom Cruise. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Because he'd done what? He was in The Outsiders.
Well, he was in The Outsiders. He was in Risky Business. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was probably because of his performance in Risky Business that he was cast in this film. Don't want to speak out of turn. That's what's kind of popping into my head right now.
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet.
But yeah, we're looking at, it's 1986. If you look into Tom Cruise's filmography, he had done not a ton. He'd done a handful of films, but you're correct, he'd done Outsiders, Risky. He had, I think, 4 films come out in 83, if I'm not mistaken. And, of those, certainly Risky Business was by far and away the largest film. And he had done, I think, an 85 Legend, Ridley Scott's film. And that was not a big hit at all. I don't even think it made its budget back.
He was by no means unknown, but
not unknown.
He wasn't the international superstar. Tom
right.
Cruise.
It was
kind of, I think, Top Gun sort of.
Top Gun, yeah. And you're talking there about a film, of course, that's Tony Scott. So it's interesting. Cruise worked with both brothers, Tony and Ridley, by this point. But yeah, look, we all know Top Gun. When Top Gun was released, I think that was 15 million. And that thing pulled in over $350 million in the box office. It was, a cultural phenomenon.
I love it too.
And
I'm
then
a big Top Gun fan.
yeah, it's great. And then and then he really sailed. Now it's interesting. Right after that, in '88, he did Cocktail, which is hysterical. and I actually, not that we're going to make this episode. We're not going to make this episode about Tom Cruise, but it's fun to find context for the film. For Color of Money.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, of course, Tom went on to be Tom, and did that whole thing.
Yeah, first things first. Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, I can't. We'll get into the specifics, of course, but I wasn't surprised. I think most of the time I wind up liking Scorsese movies, but I think that what what really took me on this one was that, and again, we'll get into this much more when we're talking about the direction and stuff like that. But I thought that it was an interestingly subdued Scorsese for the first half,
Uh-huh.
and then really became more of a Scorsese, like,
Like
montage,
stylistically.
stylistic,
You
lots
mean,
of
yeah.
dollying,
Yeah, a
zooms,
lot of
things like that.
energy. Yeah, a
Yeah,
lot of
very
energy.
kinetic in the second half.
Kinetic,
Not that
yeah.
I can't even say I prefer one over the other, because one of my favorite Scorsese movies is Silence, which
Hmm.
has none of that kinetic stuff.
Yes,
Like, it's
totally. Yeah.
very, very subdued. But no, I really was impressed by the movie, on a technical and, just as a storytelling.
Yeah.
You
Now,
know,
now I'm curious, like what would you consider like some people think this is kind of like a sports, like it's in the sport genre. You also have elements, not necessarily like a con film, but hustlers are kind of con men, right? So there's
they're like
elements
legal
of
con men in a way.
yeah, there's kind of like is this like a con artist film? Is it a sports film? Is it a mentorship kind of mentor mentee film? There's elements of all of these things. Did you have any expectations at all about the film going into it? I mean, it's
No, I hadn't seen The Hustler in so long that I
okay,
didn't really,
and it's not a film of Scorsese's backlog or filmography that I think really stands out much, which is why I wanted to pick it, because I don't think it doesn't it kind of lays low, and I think it could be easily overlooked, and I think actually in a lot of ways it has been, including with its transfer, but we're going to get to that as well
Yeah.
later. But well, for me, this film came out in '86. I was 10 years old when it was released. I certainly had not seen The Hustler by when this film came out. At 10 years old, I wasn't given to watching 1960 early 60s black and white films. I don't think it probably wouldn't have caught my attention. But I didn't see the film probably until it came out on cable, like a lot of these 80s films. And if you guys have been listening to this podcast for a while, I just realized it seems like a lot of my picks are films that came out in the mid 80s. Clearly, this was a time frame for me where
a formative time frame.
Formative time frame. But I probably saw this film 3-4-ish years later. So I remember watching it, I think either like late junior high or high school. And so Tom Cruise would have probably been the person that would have stood out to me most. I don't know how many Newman films I had seen. I certainly, of course, knew of Newman. But yeah, I mean, I think as a kid, it was probably, the way Scorsese shoots with such confidence. These characters are cool, right? I mean, Newman is super cool in his own way. Cruise is, although
a hothead,
goofy,
Yeah.
to a 12-year-old kid or whatever I was, he came off as like being super cool, and you've got the pool sharks, and you've got this amazing pool photography, and the music and everything, very like kinetic film. So I remember very much loving it. And then as I got older, I started to get more interested in the relationship between Newman and Cruise, and this whole kind of, dynamic of hustlers and con artists and mentorship relationships. And that became like very intriguing to me. And, what is winning, what is losing. And I think is an interesting kind of metaphor here for a lot of us, unfortunately, as we go through life, where, we kind of start off wanting to do whatever it is we end up doing in life because we have a passion for it. Hopefully.
Yes,
And
of course,
and that
yeah.
kind of becomes corrupt over time. We do things for money. And, this is kind of part of the necessity of life, right? I mean, we have to pay our bills, most of us. We have to earn an income and so that we have a roof and food. And so, this passion could kind of become corrupted. And then a lot of our life might be spent trying to find that passion and love again for what we originally, wanted to do. And I certainly have had experiences like this in the film industry. So now, many, many years later, as an older adult, with a lot more experience under my belt, I see this film even in a totally new way. So one of the kind of signs of a good film to me is that it can grow with its audience over time. And I feel like this film really has, at least for me.
No,
So
definitely. Yeah.
okay, cool. Well, I'll be interested to see, so I have a history with the film. You don't have a history with the film. So it'll be
Hmm.
interesting as we kind of go through certain aspects of the film. We'll kind of compare notes. It'll be interesting to have a couple different perspectives. So I think we talked a little bit about context for the film. And we'll expand on that a little bit because I think it's important. It kind of educates a lot of the other ways that you can look at the film. I mean, it is a sequel, like you said, to The Hustler. And The Hustler, I actually did watch it again, and I hadn't seen it for maybe about a decade. So I watched it right before I watched The Color of Money this time. And Hustler is 1961.
Hmm.
That's Newman. Gleason plays Minnesota Fats, who is, I guess, basically the kind of Newman's arch rival, Fast Eddie Felson. That's Newman's
Yes.
character in
Yeah.
both of these films, by the way. Gotta love that name, Fast Eddie and Minnesota Fats. Those are great names. But in that film, Newman is almost kind of in a way in the Tom Cruise role in Color of Money.
Yeah.
He's
He
the,
just
he's
wants
the,
to kind of play
he's the
and
yeah
yeah.
he's the younger pool player. He's in it to be the best. He has a passion for pool. The money is not as important. He just wants to be the best. He seeks out Minnesota Fats, who's notorious to be as the best pool hustler in the land, and ultimately he ends up being beat.
Hmm.
And we go through this, and it's interesting because The Hustler is actually very much a love story in a sense. I mean, there's not actually a ton of pool if you really look at the film. A lot of the film is spent with the relationship between Fast Eddie and Piper Laurie's character and their relationship. She's an alcoholic, and but she sees, even though she has struggles with her own issues with alcoholism, and she's kind of this abandoned character in a sense. She sees how he's being corrupted
Yeah.
by
Yeah. Yeah.
by
Yeah.
by George C. Scott's
She's very much
character.
almost like a third eye in a way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah. And she kind of sees that his passion for the game and his desire to just be pure and be the best is being corrupted
Yeah.
by these other characters' desire for money, and and they don't really have a passion. They're just kind of using him. He's a pawn. He's these people are bored, kind of cynical, corrupt characters, and he's fallen into this world with them.
Hmm.
And of course, by the end of the film, that's exactly what happens. I mean, he does beat Minnesota Fats, but he's kind of run out of the game, and he has got through through the course of the film, he's kind of become one of them in effect. And so that's where we
Yes.
find him at the start of this film. And
He
we
owns
kind
like
of
a bar. He's a liquor salesman too. He's kind of
yeah, well, and it's interesting to note he's selling like generic liquor and
hmm.
fake labels so that
Yeah.
people so
That's
that
one of the first quick lines. Is like, "Can you get me some Jack Daniels labels or
yeah,
something?" Or yeah.
so he's a con artist and kind of a
Yeah.
hustler in every sense of the word. I mean, but it's interesting to note too, that in '86 when this film came out, Scorsese, who definitely, of course, had a reputation at this point, he had shot several films, but some of the biggest being Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, and Raging Bull. Of course, extremely critically successful films. But he had had a run of a couple films after that that weren't very successful. He did King of Comedy in '82. He did After Hours in '85. And although I personally think these are great films, and I think most people have come around to agree with that sentiment, at the time they were really disappointing.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah. They didn't do well at all.
didn't do well at all. And so here we have Newman actually coming to Scorsese saying, "I'd like you to direct this film."
Hmm.
The author of The Hustler had just written 2 years prior in '84 this book, The Color of Money, and Newman was looking to reprise his role as Fast Eddie Felson, so he comes to Scorsese and hires him basically to do this job. So it's in a sense, this is Newman had probably more to do with this film being put together than Scorsese, and it's
Hmm.
interesting. I don't I want to be careful. I'm not sure if this is 100% fact, but I get kind of a sense that Scorsese almost doesn't see this as like really one of his films, that he almost kind of
Hmm.
sees himself as a gun for hire on
Yeah.
this
Yeah. I
film.
mean, I can understand that too. That it's
Yeah,
like it probably wasn't something that he had been thinking about for a long time. I
right.
know. I think Last Temptation of the Christ had actually just been canned by one of the studios that they were gonna do it, and then so he was really kind of down
Yeah.
But the fact that that wasn't made.
Which was clearly a passionate project for him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I can totally understand. I've done things that I've directed that I haven't written or really been involved in much of the pre-production on, where I've just sort of come in to direct and of course made those decisions. But I don't really see those as things that I,
It feels
proudly
different.
show off as my own either.
Yeah.
It's much more of something that I'm kind of like, oh yeah, it was much more of a job, and like you said, kind of a hired gun. So I can totally understand why Scorsese wouldn't necessarily consider this in his, like, if you get a Scorsese box set that he himself curated, I could see him leaving this one out.
Yeah, I think so.
But that doesn't speak to its quality at all. I would say that this, again, I think both of
agreed.
us really, really liked this movie.
Yeah.
But more so that I just understand that, with Scorsese, it wasn't his. It wasn't like, something that he had been dreaming about making for...
He didn't originate the story.
Yeah.
It's a sequel. Obviously, we don't have Scorsese shooting sequels at any other point in his, filmography. So yeah, and it's interesting too. Tom Cruise, like we said before, Tom Cruise certainly was a name, and he was clearly a rising star. But Top Gun had not released, and so he wasn't, the Tom Cruise we all know and love. And I think it's great because here you see Tom Cruise letting it all out. He really goes for it. He's over the top in a lot of ways, and I mean that in the best of senses. The Werewolf of London scene where he's slaying his opponents. I mean, he really goes for it, and he's a total goof. He's a total flake. And you don't see this. You don't see him taking on roles like this really ever again in his filmography.
No,
I mean,
where he's kind of almost not an antagonist, but he's not. There's not really any redemption for him. He doesn't like come out of it being like, oh.
Yeah.
Cruise, I loved his character. He was, not that, he's a great character, but not in a good person sense. It's also interesting to note.
And it's not his movie. It's Fast Eddie Felson's movie. And so you don't see Tom Cruise, with rare exception. I mean, you have his kind of big cameo, I guess you might call it, in Magnolia. But you don't see Tom Cruise really, you don't see him playing second fiddle.
You don't also, I mean, it's interesting actually about kind of, I think, the structure of the movie is that you think, starting off, that it is going to be that Tom Cruise is going to be the main character, and that it's going to sort of be like a handoff movie where it's like you get the old, master handing it off to the new young gun, but it really goes back into a movie about Felson, and so I think what's also interesting is that Walter Tevis wrote a screenplay for it that was rejected. That apparently it was quite different, and so
and let's add a note real quick here. So Walter Tevis wrote The Hustler, the novel, and he also wrote The Color of Money, the novel. And just as a quick little piece of trivia, he also wrote The Queen's Gambit, which is a recent Netflix miniseries that was very, very successful. But okay, so that's interesting. So go back to that. So Tevis did write an original screenplay that was rejected, you said.
Yeah, so so apparently they decided not to use it, and so then it was written by Richard Price.
Who was nominated for an Academy Award for this film, by the way.
Yeah, and so I wonder. I've never read the novel, either of them. I've never read The Hustler or Color of Money by Walter Tevis, but I'd be curious if how similar they are, because apparently the novel wasn't written necessarily to be a sequel. That it was written to be sort of a separate story. So I'd be curious to know if that means, because it's so vague, it could just mean that it was written to center around perhaps Cruise's character in the novel as well, or it could mean that it like the novel may have had little to do with Eddie.
And this film could be standalone. I mean, I would assume that the vast majority of the people who saw this film in '86 did not see The Hustler in '61. I mean, you're talking about a 25-year time span divide between the two films. So, this film totally stands on its own. I think there's some added texture. There's some added depth if you have seen The Hustler. And if
you watch them back to back even,
If you watch them back to back, you really see that there are some ties into each other in some really nice, subtle ways.
Almost like a longer narrative arc.
There you go. It's a longer narrative arc because you actually, if you kind of think of it, we come into Eddie Falson, Newman's character here. It's actually kind of in the middle of his arc. If you look at both films together, So it does add a lot, and just cool little tiny callbacks. There's a handful of lines where they talk about character being the most important aspect of being a good player. In The Hustler, we have some fun callbacks here to character. Helen Shaver's character here, his love interest, talks about character. So there's just a handful of little callbacks that actually pay off quite nicely if you've seen and remember The Hustler.
It's
But
also funny.
you don't
'Cause
have to.
Yeah, I hadn't seen, as I said, The Hustler for maybe 6 or 7 years.
Mhm.
But I do, one thing that I really appreciate, and this is, owes to Paul Newman so much as well, is that he really does a good job of playing a matured version of the character from The Hustler, right? Like that he comes into this movie and you don't feel like it's just the same guy. You
Oh
really feel
gosh,
like
yeah.
that 25 years have gone by and that he's a different person,
Oh,
that
you
he's
really
had
feel it.
experiences. And so but there's still, he does such a good job also, though, of getting back into that role and making you believe that this is the same character, but 25 years later.
I mean,
Because
and
I think that's a huge thing, especially
yeah,
today, now that we're getting all of these sequels that come out, like the new Star Wars movies or Ghostbusters or,
mm,
whatever, you name it. There's a ton of them coming
everything.
out every week,
Yeah,
where it's like, 25 years have gone by since the last one. And I think the issue with a lot of those movies nowadays is that I don't know if it's a director's thing or if it's a studio that are kind of like, we need people to remember. It's all about nostalgia. And so they try to almost get the actors who are playing these characters 25 years on to play the exact same character.
they
Like to
yeah
play
they
the character that they were 25 years ago. And it's
between the
what I think is,
Botox and the Photoshop, it's
yes,
like they
yeah.
look identical.
And so
Yeah,
I think that it's really interesting that, and perhaps it's maybe a kind of a touch of the era, that there wasn't really a huge, like this, we have such a nostalgia wave now,
yeah,
whereas that wasn't really much, as far as I'm aware, when this film came out. So there wasn't this whole like, we're recreating the magic of the first movie. We're, it's
yeah,
Paul Newman back as Eddie. It's it's
yeah.
much more a continuation, and it feels like, again, like you said, it can stand on its own. It's a separate film. It has its own, it has its own arc, even though it can be involved in the arc of the larger, duo of the films.
Yeah.
But it does, watching this movie on its own, I had no issue getting into it, enjoying it, connecting with characters and things like that. And again, that goes with saying that I have seen The Hustler, but it's been so long that,
Yeah.
it's definitely not a movie that's fresh on my mind by
Right.
any means.
And that's the way almost everybody would have come into this picture.
Yes. Yeah,
with that not
precisely,
being fresh. I think, we get to performances in a little more detail, but since you spoke about Newman, and, I think I'll just add this little tidbit while we're here. I mean, Newman, look, he's one of your favorite actors. He's one of my favorite actors. By all accounts, he was an extraordinary human being, period.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he just does such an outstanding job. You're right, of conveying the life that would have been led between the end of the last film and the beginning of this film.
Mm-hmm.
The age that's on him now. A lot of this, the writing is great and the direction is great. The way he's introduced, and I mean, it's
a brilliant introduction. It's such a good
he
introduction.
does such a fantastic job of carrying his age and the weight of so much life, but still there's this vitality, this sharpness to him, this edge to him, that it's like he almost is like youthful without having to put on any of these pretenses of being youthful in a certain sense. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
And I think
he's
a
just
huge
super
part of that too
cool.
is how he's almost introduced alongside John Turturro's character,
Oh
who,
yeah,
by the way, I think is like a criminally underrated actor. Every single time
yeah.
I see John Turturro in something, he's fantastic. He's, he was also in To Live and Die in L.A. He was fantastic in that.
Except for that. Oh man, the Coen brothers, Big Lebowski. It's except for the Big Lebowski spinoff. I mean, come on.
Oh God, yes, yeah, the spin-off they made.
Jesus
yeah.
rolls or something. Oh, okay.
But no, but he, when in the movies that he's good in, I guess is an easier way to put it. But no, I think that he's like, even in this, he's got maybe 2 or 3 scenes, and he stands out in every single one where he just plays this guy that's just filled with jealousy, but almost, he's played right on the cusp of comic relief, where he's not just a joke, but he's also very much something that is like, you're meant to get a few laughs out of his scenes. How he, he tells Paul Newman as he leaves, he's like, "You suck," and you suck, and you almost expect, again, going into the movie, you expect if this had the trajectory of a typical sports movie, it would be Newman training Cruz, and then the end, the big finale, the showdown would be Turturro versus Cruz, and Newman would be in the sidelines,
Yeah.
but he'd have to coach Cruz through Turturro, who was his old kind of, it would be like Karate Kid. But no, it completely, he just beats Turturro at the end.
Which were huge films in the
montage.
80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
These kind of, you have a lot of these sports films where that's, that would absolutely be what you would expect from the story. Well, let's talk about the story a little bit and the directing. I mean, you had mentioned that one of the things that stood out to you really predominantly was this kind of that you have almost two different Scorseses. You've got this kind of subdued or, kind of more traditional kind of standard way that the first half of the film is shot. And then we go, full Scorsese, as I think
really kinetic camera, really,
and it kind of starts with Newman's montage where he's getting back into shape, he's getting his prescription glasses, he's swimming, he's practicing, and we get a lot more action that becomes really kinetic, and the music is amped up, and we've got the quick dollies and
that he almost abandons the hustler lifestyle. This whole and I think it's super, because again, this is of course after King of Comedy, which was 1982, which, as you said, didn't do super well. King of Comedy is another one that I think is very subdued Scorsese. Very, there's not those big montage
stylistically
dollies,
is what you're kind of talking about, like the kinetics, the kineticism of the camera. Just to be clear,
and so it's interesting, that this movie is you get both of those, and I think it works super well in context of the story as well. Like it works in favor of the way that this movie is laid out, and the way that that everything kind of comes to be. I think it's such a brilliant decision, because it's like you get this subdued Scorsese, and Eddie is not in his own, and then suddenly, as soon as he clicks on it, then you get this kinetic Scorsese, that the things that Scorsese is really famous for. And it's like you feel this sudden return to craft. Not that the first half is by any means poorly directed. I actually, again, as I said, love subdued Scorsese, but I think the fact that he chose to do that, the fact that he chose to direct the first half much more low energy, and just sort of a little bit more objective in terms of how he places the camera and shoots the scenes. That as soon as you get the subjectivity, you feel like you're back in with Eddie. Like you almost feel this revitalization of energy that's washed over him and the audience.
It's certainly helpful. I mean, it escalates the energy of the film. It brings us to a climax with this head of steam. It gives the film a dynamic feeling where it's you really have this kind of elevation. It assists the story in that way. Absolutely, and it's a good example of how the camera can be used to, not just in a utilitarian sense where, you're showing what's happening and but that it actually, the style with which you use the camera can actually shift as we go through the acts of a film, and can actually really lend weight behind the beats of the story that you're trying to convey,
Exactly. It's like a master
example.
class in using a director's style, I think.
Yeah.
That rarely is seen in even a lot of movies that were contemporary with this, that where it's like, of course, every director, you think of like auteurship and things like that, that a lot of directors have a fingerprint on a movie where you can tell that those are their stylistic choices that they use all the time, and that really makes them. But I think Scorsese in this one uses it in a really special way that like elevates a lot of the picture. So I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's beautiful to watch. I mean, there's just I think from the get go, the camera is actually, if you pay attention to it, because some of the stuff is hard to shoot. You've got people around a table. You've got action on the table. You've got people moving around a table. The camera does such a fantastic job of fluidly showing us people playing pool around a table, showing the action on the table, keeping us like spatially aligned. It doesn't ever feel weird. You don't ever get spatially confused. It always is.
You understand the game immediately, because they're not necessarily playing pool. They're playing
nine ball.
Yeah.
And you're right. And so, and you're correct. It's like they do kind of explain Nine Ball a little bit, and there's some narration in the beginning.
It's by Scorsese himself.
By Scorsese himself, that does kind of like lay a little bit of groundwork so that you, as an audience, you kind of understand what's happening on the pool table. But exactly, I mean, it's because you're having to deal with not just the spatial orientation and the power relationships between the players playing and the drama there, but you also have to keep the spatial nature of the game on the table clear. And that's tough. You know, The Hustler didn't show much pool. It's interesting if you watch The Hustler, I mean, very, very, very little pool is shown. There's only a handful of shots. This film shows a lot of pool. And that, I mean, that's got to be really challenging.
Then Thelma Schoonmaker's editing is really superb when it
always
comes to showing those sequences as well, like the sequences of the pool. And again, you have this fluidity, especially in the second half, where and that's what I love about Scorsese, is that he has this way of making his scenes flow from scene to scene in a montage sense, but not in a typical, you know, Rocky IV, he's training on the farm
the training montage.
Exactly. You've got this. It fits so well within the movie that it doesn't feel like it's a scene. It feels like it's just like you're just evolving with these characters. So it's, yeah, I think the direction, the editing is all really, really superb, and I think honestly some of Scorsese's best, and which is a shame that so many people have probably missed this movie or don't really think of it as one of Scorsese's best.
Yeah.
Because it really, you know, it's a masterclass in all of his work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's visually just really interesting to see, and you've got some, you know, really classic shots here. Maybe one of the most kind of famous is the reflection of Newman in the gosh, and now I can't remember if it's an 8-ball or if it's I can't remember which ball, but it's and it's probably important to the story. But you know, we see him as he leans in to begin to play, and you have this like really beautiful reflection of him in the ball. There's just a there's a really beautiful shot where he walks into near the end at the tournament, and you've got these pool tables laid out, and we've got this like organ music, and you know, kind of knowing Scorsese and how important religion is, and as a theme in a lot of his movies, you know, this like organ music comes on, and it's like, you know, this is Fast Eddie's church, man. You know, like he's entered church, baby. And just so many really beautiful shots like that. And again, I've kind of like practically taken notes, you know, just how well the camera moves around the table. And because you know, sometimes it's a challenge. I mean, you know, it's almost like when you've got people sitting around a table, you know, and it seems like it'd be one of the easiest shots to, you know, scenes to shoot, but you've got a handful of people around a table and they're having a conversation. It's like
to keep it interesting,
to keep it dramatic, and to keep it spatially clean. It can be surprisingly challenging. And so now imagine that you've got people around a table, but they're moving around the table, and what they're doing on the table is actually important, and you need to show it, you know. So I think it's a good, you know, learning experience for anybody out there. You know, take a look at how these are shot. They're great. So it's not just those really bombastic stylistic shots that are worth checking out. I mean, let's talk about the cinematography a little bit more too. Michael Ballas.
I mean, I think first off, there's a lot of natural light, because rather than shooting on big sets, a lot of the scenes actually took place in real pool halls.
Yes, these are definitely on location, at least as I understand it. I think pretty much the whole film was shot on location, right?
Yeah, and it's Michael Ballhaus, who of course is you know, somebody who Scorsese would go on to. This is the second movie together, but
they did After Hours.
Go on to
was
work
their first
on everything until The Departed.
And
I think that it's a really, really, again, much like the direction of at least the first half of the film. Nothing crazy, but very, very beautiful. You know, it's lit very, very well balanced. Everything has got this really soft, again, because you've got.
I wish I could have been able to tell.
Right, yeah.
I wish I could have.
Yeah.
I'm like, so it is so hard for me to tell in some instances what was meant and what was not. So just a small digression here. So I have this film on both Blu-ray and I have an iTunes digital copy. I watched it on iTunes, but it didn't matter because both of the transfers are identical. They are horrible. This is and I mean, I couldn't even count how many films I've seen on Blu-ray and HD digitally. This is, I think I can safely say, the worst transfer of a major feature film I have ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at many places, consistently, the HD 1080p transfer of this film looked like an early DVD release.
Yeah.
At best.
Mm-hmm.
It was so soft, and not appropriately soft.
Like it was just
Muted,
a horrible print.
Just a horrible bit rate. A lot of data missing, banding, artifacting. Grain looked horrible. The colors muted, washed out. Just horrible, man. But you said that you saw this and it looked good.
Whatever transfer I saw was actually quite nice. The colors were balanced. It was sharp. That was kind of how I knew that you had likely seen a different one than I had, because it was you were saying it was soft, and mine was actually quite
they saved the good
sharp.
stuff for Canadians, man. We just don't
Apparently.
get access to that down here in the U.S. Man, I'm gonna have to start importing my films from Canada, dude.
But but I was gonna say too that it's one of those movies that you just have a naturally nice, lighting situation where pool tables always have the light above them, so you have contextual lighting, practical lighting in a scene that looks neat, that looks cool. You know, if you've ever stood at a pool table in a bar or a pool hall with anybody, you know that everything kind of looks dramatic because you got the top-down light right from the pool table, then a soft light bouncing up from the table itself, of course, from the above light that's bouncing off of the fabric.
Yeah.
So you just naturally have these really nice practicals, and I think that they use that to their advantage a lot, where there's nothing super fancy going on other than that. Every light is just sort of accentuating the natural, what would look natural in a pool hall. There's no crazy, it's not super hazed. It's not like you've got big bars of light coming in for the windows and things like that. It doesn't look really, really ultra stylized.
Which is interesting because if you call this a sports movie, which you can make an argument, this is a sports movie in some sense.
It's classified.
Right?
I think most things put sports in its genre.
Couldn't be further from different. I mean, in many ways, but we're talking about the cinematography than Scorsese's other sports film, Raging Bull. I mean, you couldn't, which was shot by Michael Chapman. I mean, you couldn't find two films that look more different than these two films from cinematography perspective. So it's interesting the like radical differences with which Scorsese approached both of these sports films, and they're not that far apart. We've got 6 years apart between the two. So it's just interesting. And
no, it's definitely it's I mean, not weird. Weird's not the right word for it, but it shows the range, I think, and also it's kind of, again, an interesting little look at how a cinematographer might affect the look of a film and affect a director's direction. In that, again, I think I love Michael Ballhaus. I think that he's done some really, really brilliant work on all of the Scorsese movies that he shot. But I'd say, this one is interestingly natural. That the lighting is very much. It's practical in a sense. Like everything is influenced by the practicals. Everything is sourced from whatever the practical elements of the scene are, which of course, in cinematography most things are, but there's no accentuation on a grand scale. You're not getting
no obvious stylistic
smoke filled. Exactly.
But
there's not color weird,
one of the things that I feel
like
like they did a really great job with is one of the things that stands out to me is this feeling of, I get like an East Coast vibe, almost from a lot of it. I get kind of an East Coast vibe. I get a cold vibe. It's like I think,
tungsten.
Yeah, and I get it's just that stood out to me. I think it was effective. Yeah, I mean, you get just, it looks cold. It feels cold. It's kind of gritty. In that way, it feels quite gritty to me, and you
don't really know. I think that also adds to it that you don't really know how long the film takes place over, because it seems to go through at
Hmm.
least like 2 or 3 seasons. Like there's
Yeah.
a scene in winter, fall, and I believe it comes around to the ending where it's almost like summer.
Well, and you don't know,
So
and they're in different states. They're traveling,
yeah,
so you
yeah,
don't know if are the seasons changing? Is time passing? Is it that they're going from state to state? And
yeah,
the
yeah.
the tournaments in Vegas, and before they were in Philly or whatever, wherever they were. I don't recall exactly. Chicago, whatever. So
Atlantic City, yeah.
yeah, Atlantic City. So, but I do get a sense that it kind of helps convey the way it's shot, helps convey this, like, a sense of kind of disorientation that a person would experience if you live on the road and you're going
Yeah,
from
if you're
season
suddenly
to
swept up in
season,
this. Yeah.
or kind of this kind of gritty, and a lot of this is locations that they pick, but this kind of, I mean, it's not very glamorous, right? They're playing
No.
pool in bars, in
like
pool
Chicago,
halls.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, and they do a great job of conveying that.
They
I mean,
stopped to ask directions to one for some guys standing around a fire pit, like standing below a burning dumpster, and it's like,
yeah,
you
like a
know,
barrel, yeah, exactly. I mean, and a lot of times it's funny too. Now there is inflation, but they're playing for like $20, $50 a hand. Now, of
yeah,
course, it does elevate, and they start playing for $500 a hand or $1,000 a hand. But I mean, it's almost, in a sense, it's like there's some humor to this too, where it's like, in their world, this is like the most serious thing
hmm,
ever. But
especially for Newman.
to an outsider, it's like, I mean, you're playing a game for like $50.
Yeah,
I mean, a
yeah.
little bit. There's a little bit of that, which I kind of find is funny.
And I like that Newman's like, that if you screw this up, then no one's gonna play you here to like Atlantic City. Your name will go through like beer hall or pool hall to pool hall, and you
Yeah,
won't get
yeah,
another
yeah.
game for the rest of your life.
Which is, it's funny to I mean, I love films that are about this kind of, like, these subcultures that I don't have any exposure to, and that seem like interesting and fun.
Hmm.
But let's talk a little bit more about the performances, because there really are a handful of outstanding performances. We've talked a little bit about Newman's. He was actually won an Academy Award for this film. Now,
Yes,
I mean,
and
I think,
a few other people were nominated. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio.
uh-huh.
She was nominated. Richard Price, Boris Levin, and Karen O'Hara for art direction. They were all nominated for the Oscar.
So there were a handful of nominations, yeah, and a couple for performances. And Newman, I think some people felt that Newman's award was kind of a makeup
Yeah,
award. Now,
yeah.
I think Newman's performance is outstanding in this film, and I don't
Yes.
I don't recall off the top of my head exactly what performances he was up against in '86, but I think that the performance is outstanding. I think it stands as one of his better performances in a filmography of outstanding performances. So I don't personally have a problem with it, but I do understand.
The other best actors that year weren't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say they were bad, but they weren't. They aren't. Age-old historical. It was Dexter Gordon for Round Midnight.
Okay.
Bob Hoskins in Mona Lisa, William Hurt in Children of a Lesser God, and James Woods in Salvador. So
And who
nothing
won?
like groundbreaking, I don't
And
think.
Tom won.
Yeah.
I mean, Tom won. Newman won.
Yeah,
And you're right. I mean, and Salvador, I think, is an outstanding film and a performance. Some of the others I can't recall off the top of my head. But, but that's what people thought. And I think, there were a handful of films that that Newman maybe should have won for. And so
Maybe,
people
yeah,
felt a little
yeah.
bit like, he's a little bit older. People felt like he might have, even as far back as '58 with Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. You did have '61's The Hustler, '63's HUD, Cool Hand Luke, of course, in '67. I mean, I feel like he should have won for that, for example.
The Sting.
So handful of performances, yeah, The Sting, and even some people maybe Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, a little bit less so for that, but he did receive a BAFTA for that. But yeah, so few people, a little bit of thought that was a makeup, but I mean his performance is outstanding. We've talked a little bit about how he, I mean he's he's probably one of the more handsome human beings who have ever
Yes.
existed. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
really would be easy for him to have traded on that exclusively. And he really allowed himself to age, like you've discussed. And, he played a lot of roles where he was this old, cantankerous, cranky person. Nobody's Fool is a great example. That's even when he was considerably older in '94. Well, not considerably, less than a decade older. But he allowed himself to age, and I really enjoy that about his performance. Tom Cruise is fantastic. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like Cruise is custom made for this. Like I feel like the cocky nature with which Cruise plays. I mean, I can just imagine. I don't know if this is true, but Cruise does such a good job that I could just see it as like Cruise is this like
Yeah.
special charmed life, and he's like great at what he does, and he's never not been great at what he does, and it just shows the effortlessness with which he plays pool. And I mean the Werewolf of London scene is just so outstanding. I
Yeah.
love how he uses his cue stick. I mean, it's just great, dude. I love it.
And he's somewhat similar to, like, even just his cockiness really. It's interesting that he did this the same year as Top Gun, because there's definitely that aspect of the character in Top Gun. Like, you got Maverick, who's this cocky pilot. So,
Yeah, and he's great at what he does. I mean, that's
Yeah.
Tom Cruise's thing, right? It's like he's great at what he does. He's super confident,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a big chunk of what he does is that. And let's face it, he's great. But here, I mean, as we did hint at a little earlier, he allows himself to be goofy, though. He allows himself to be over the top. I mean, he's still cool. But he's also, you can see the kind of ridiculousness. You can see the cheese factor. You can see, when Newman is like, "Man, you are a character," and he's like,
Yeah.
"I didn't say you had character, buddy. I said you are a character."
Yes.
We
Yeah,
see
yeah.
that, and Cruise allows himself to be in that position, which I think is great. And Mary Elizabeth, and I'm like, boy, Mastrantonio. She, I think, is such a good. She's like clearly, maybe not clearly, but she seemed to me to be maybe a few years older. Clearly, she's more seasoned. Clearly, she's able to see a few moves ahead further than Cruise's character, and she does a fantastic job in that role. And she's kind of in between. I mean, it's not a love triangle at all, but she's kind of in between Fast Eddie and Tom Cruise, and she does a really fantastic job of making this an interesting trifecta, an interesting triangle where Newman is having to kind of play her and Cruise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I love the way that she kind of uses her sexuality to kind of play with both of those characters. It's really quite great. And Forrest Whitaker, dude. Forrest Whitaker.
He's got one scene. And he's
great.
great.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so
and
good.
it really, I think it's a wonderful scene too, because that's, I'd say, also one of Newman's best scenes in the movie, if not
it's
the
so
best.
I mean, it is outstanding. And if you want to see an extraordinary scene with two actors just kicking some butt, check out Newman and Forrest Whitaker in this scene. It's like what in the latter like third
Yeah, it's
of the
about
film.
like, I guess I would say that the turning act into Act 3 or so. Yeah.
But Forrest Whitaker just does such he's so unique in this film, and it's amazing how he's able to play. There's a softness. There's like this real softness to him, and like a vulnerability in a strange way. But but underneath there is this like extremely intelligent cutthroat hustler. But there's like mixed in with this kind of like vulnerability and softness. It's just really quite beautiful, and such a contrast to Newman, and it's really wonderful. But yeah, I mean, the performances are strong. The music, we haven't talked about that too much. I didn't really recall the music too much, except for like the Clapton song, which was kind of a minor hit, I think, back then. But Robbie Robertson from the band does the score here, and it's like this really interesting non-traditional kind of score. I think it's how did you find it? I felt like
I liked it. Yeah, I do like Robbie Robertson, but it's not really similar to his.
No, it's not like the band at all.
Another Toronto guy, but
how would you even describe? Like, how would you? I'm trying to think of like what words I would use to describe the music, the score. What I mean, can you think of a way to describe it?
I can't really think of a genre. It's not like folksy. Isn't really it. It's sort of like a soft, even rock wouldn't really do it.
Yeah, it's not rock. It's not like 80s pop. It's not.
No.
I'm trying to think of it. I'm not like a musician or a music expert.
There's like some piano and
it's a bit eccentric, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
definitely.
the vocalizations are kind of, I mean, it's not lyrics, but there are vocalizations. It's kind of like But I felt like it was really effective. It kind of added a layer of kind of, the unexpected or kind of interesting. And of course, you've got it mixed in. I mean, Scorsese notorious for using rock music in his soundtracks, and I think it's actually aged fairly well. You've got, I think, a couple Robert Palmer tracks, older tracks, which I think are really good. He was the like, might as well face it, you're addicted to love, but he's kind of like a blue-eyed soul guy. But I think these are older songs than that, which I feel like still hold up. I mean, I'm not a huge Eric Clapton fan, but I actually think his hit song from this holds up actually pretty well. Warren Zevon, of course, Werewolves of London is just outstanding. And of course, Scorsese does a lot kinetically with these songs whenever he uses them.
Yes,
which is kind of his trademark. There are no Rolling Stones songs though, which is like surprising.
For Scorsese, no doo-wop and no Rolling Stones.
I know, right? It's like, how many films of Scorsese's can you watch that don't have either like doo-wop or Rolling Stones? There aren't many.
No, but I do like this soundtrack. I think it fits really well. It never imposes on anything. It just kind of is there.
Yeah.
I like Robbie Robertson. I think he's good. So.
And but it is totally different from the band. I thought it was like quite
don't
unique.
go into this expecting the band to be the score for this.
Yeah, but I was really intrigued by it. And then we have the ending, which you and I talked about this briefly. I was surprised, when I was kind of reading a little bit up on the film and kind of reorientating myself to kind of the context of the film and everything before we recorded this. I saw that quite a few people were confused, or at least it seemed that quite a few people were kind of confused with the ending, or they kind of didn't like it. They felt like it was kind of patched together or kind of missing something. Actually, was one of the biggest complaints that I read about the film, was that people felt like it was almost as if the ending was missing a scene. Like they didn't quite. I'm trying to remember. I feel like when I saw the film originally when I was younger, I probably didn't get all of the nuance of the relationship of Newman and Cruise and and what they were doing, but I probably didn't care either. But I don't recall, watching it now, it seemed to make quite a bit of sense to me. And you said that you didn't have any issues with the ending.
No, yeah, I hadn't actually realized that people did have issues until you brought it up.
Yeah. But to me, I feel like you've got this, and to me, this is an extremely interesting story. And I'm kind of fascinated with stories about mentors and mentees, and, because this is a really interesting relationship that occurs, for all of us. Throughout our lives, we're sometimes mentors, we're sometimes teachers, and we're sometimes students and mentees. And this is an interesting, complex relationship, and the roles can change at interesting times, and it's why it makes great fodder for films. And I think it's interesting here too that I think it's a really beautiful arc. And you've kind of got Tom Cruise and Paul Newman basically changing places by the end of the film.
Yeah.
And that seemed pretty clear to me.
That's what's interesting, is that it makes, to me, complete structural sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to come out of nowhere.
I think, to be even more specific, the part that kept tripping people up as far as like what I was reading was that, we're at the end of the film, it's after the tournament, and we're in the green room, I think it is, and Newman's kind of setting up, and Cruise comes busting in, and he's like, you used me. And people were like, I don't get it. What do you mean he used him? And so that's where I think, and I don't know if maybe it's like a little bit of Cruise's performance, where maybe it was just kind of over the top a little more than, that kind of threw people off. But I feel like it made sense to me. I think that,
because it's you think about it, they've hardly spoken since he left them in that pool hall.
Right, he abandons
being humiliated
them.
by it. So they've only spoken a few, like maybe 3 words to each other, even just briefly meeting each other in the hallway.
Yep.
And then it's like, of course, Cruise would feel used, because it's like, oh, you walked out on us.
Yeah,
and now
you said that you were gonna be my mentor. You were going to teach me, and of course, what ends up really kind of happening. He is like, Newman definitely teaches him how to hustle, and of course, by the end of the film, you see that that Cruise is actually completely switched. I mean, Cruise is now the ruthless, effective hustler. He no longer plays the game for the game itself.
Yeah,
He no longer
yeah.
plays it to be the best pool player. He's playing pool in order to hustle money from other people. So his orientation to the game has completely changed. And I mean, depending on your perspective on things, you could say that he was corrupted. That would be one way to potentially look at it. It's kind of how I see it personally. And now Newman has gone from being the hustler and the person who only cared about money to only caring about being the best pool player he can be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I think Cruz kind of sees that, what ended up happening was that he feels like Newman used him to get back into the game. So it's like, you didn't actually, you weren't trying to do anything for me at all, ever. You were just trying to get back into the game.
Yeah.
So that's how I interpret it. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I kind of felt about it. But I just thought it was interesting that there was, because, sometimes in these films where there's kind of role reversals, kind of con stories, hustler stories, that stuff can kind of get, plots can get confused. But I felt like this was like very straightforward and very effective. So,
No, definitely. Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I think unless you've got anything else that you'd like to bring up about the film,
No, I think we've covered plenty. Yeah.
We've touched on, obviously you could talk about a film forever, but that'd be crazy if we had, our memory cards only have so many hours. So,
Yes. Yeah.
but it was a pleasure, man. This is one of my favorites from way back when I was a kid. I'm glad that you enjoyed it too. It's always fun when I get to pick a film that you haven't seen yet. That's a joy to me. So I'm happy that you enjoyed it. I enjoyed our conversation. I hope everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed it as well. If you haven't seen this film, go see it. It'd be crazy. It'd be weird if you'd listened to this whole thing and you hadn't seen the film. Maybe you did that. I don't know.
And we spoiled the whole thing for you.
We spoiled
the whole thing. Or you're watching it while we talk about it. Like a commentary track.
We should do like a commentary track sometime.
That'd be
We
fun.
will have to think of something fun for our 50th episode. I'm going to hold us to that. We're going to have to do that. We'll think of something fun. But in the meantime, everybody, have a wonderful couple weeks. We look forward to coming back together and recording another episode for you soon. And until then, everybody, take care.
Yeah, bye-bye.